A gate supervisor holds the power to ground a multi-million-dollar airliner. But what happens when that power is fueled by prejudice? At Chicago O'Hare, a decorated black pilot, Captain Marcus Thorne, is just trying to get to his cockpit. But gate supervisor Karen Miller sees a fraud, not a captain. She accuses him of faking his ID, humiliating him in front of passengers and crew. But as she calls security, a single phone call is about to change everything. And the voice on the other end isn't just her boss, it's the director of the FAA. Stay with us for this incredible story of arrogance, identity, and the hard, swift landing of karma. The air in Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 5 was thick enough to chew. It was 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, and a biting November wind was already wreaking havoc on the day's schedule. A ground delay program had been in effect since dawn, and the departure boards were a sea of angry red. Delayed. Delayed. Cancelled. Gate K-12 was the epicenter of the terminal's misery. This was the departure gate for Transcontinental Airlines Flight 1142, non-stop to London Heathrow. The waiting area was a chaotic mass of weary travellers. Businessmen in wrinkled suits argued with their phones. Families with restless children had set up makeshift camps of luggage and duty-free bags. The mood was combustible. Presiding over this chaos with an iron fist and a clipboard was Karen Miller. Karen was the senior gate supervisor, a title she wore like a military rank. She'd worked at O'Hare for 22 years, and in her mind, she was O'Hare. She had seen it all: drunks, celebrities, stowaways, and fools. She treated them all with the same weary, undisguised contempt. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it seemed to stretch the skin around her eyes. Her voice, amplified by the gate's PA system, was a sharp, nasal weapon. "Passengers for Flight 1142, she barked, silencing a fresh wave of grumbling. "We are still waiting on clearance from the tower. Shouting at my staff will not make the wind blow slower. Please, have your passports ready and wait." A young man in a university hoodie approached her desk tentatively. "Ma'am, I have a tight connection in London. I was just wondering." "Are you in first class?" Karen snapped, not even looking up from her monitor. "Ah, no, economy. Then you will board with Zone 4. Next." The boy retreated, red-faced. Karen smirked. She lived for these small, sharp victories. This was her domain. She was the gatekeeper, the guardian, the final word. At that moment, two men in crisp dark blue uniforms cut a path through the throng. The crowd parted instinctively, the way people always do for pilots. The man in the lead, pulling a standard-issue roller bag, was Captain Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a man who commanded respect without ever demanding it. At 48, he had the calm, steady eyes of someone who had spent 20,000 hours in the sky. He was tall, lean, and his black skin contrasted sharply with the starched white of his pilot's shirt. On his shoulders were the 4 gold stripes of a captain. He was ex-Air Force, a man who had flown C-17s into combat zones before transitioning to the commercial world. He was, by any measure, a pilot's pilot. Beside him was his first officer, Evan Sully Sullivan, a younger, good-natured man with freckles and bright red hair. "Morning, Sully. Looks like a zoo," Marcus murmured, his voice a low baritone. "Morning, Cap. Heard the jet stream's a mess. Karen's on the warpath, too," Sully replied, nodding toward the desk. "Karen's always on the warpath," Marcus said with a small, tired smile. "Let's just get to the flight deck. I want to triple-check the icing models before we even think about pushback." They reached the podium. Karen Miller was busy berating a gate agent, her back to them. "Excuse me," Marcus said politely, his voice cutting cleanly through her tirade. Karen spun around, annoyance flashing on her face. "Boarding hasn't—" She stopped, taking in the two pilots. Her eyes scanned Sully first, gave a curt nod, and then landed on Marcus. And she paused. Her eyes lingered. They traveled from his face to the 4 stripes on his shoulders and back to his face. It was a look Marcus Thorne had seen 1,000 times before. It was a look of computational dissonance, as if her brain was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. This face, that uniform. "Yes?" she said, her voice a full 2 shades frostier than it had been for anyone else. "Good morning," Marcus said, unfazed. "Captain Thorne and First Officer Sullivan for Flight 1142. We're heading to the flight deck." Sully, sensing the familiar tension, held his airline-issued ID badge up. Evan Sullivan. Karen barely glanced at it. "Fine." Marcus held up his own ID. It was a standard issue, federally secured Transcontinental Airlines badge. It had his photo, his name, Thorne Marcus J., his employee number, and the required holographic overlays. Beside it, he held his FAA Airman certificate. Karen looked at the ID. She looked at his face. She leaned in, squinting. "This you?" she asked. The passengers closest to the desk fell silent. The young gate agent Karen had been scolding froze, her eyes wide. Sully stiffened. "Karen, what are you—" "I'm talking to him," Karen snapped. Marcus kept his voice perfectly level, a smooth, professional calm that he'd perfected over decades. "Yes, ma'am, that's me, Captain Marcus Thorne." Karen's lip curled into a sneer. "Doesn't look like you." "I assure you," Marcus said, the temperature in his own voice dropping by 20 degrees. "It is. We need to access the aircraft. We're already behind." He made to retrieve his ID, but Karen snatched it from his hand. She held it up to the fluorescent light, tilting it back and forth. "The hologram looks funny," she announced, loud enough for the first few rows of passengers to hear. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his patience now visibly fraying. "That is a federally issued, tamper-proof identification card. It was issued by our own corporate security. There is nothing funny about it." "That's what people who fake IDs always say," Karen shot back. She tapped her acrylic nail on Marcus's face in the photo. "It's easy to get these uniforms. It's easy to print a piece of plastic. But you don't get past me. I've been here 22 years. I can spot a fake a mile away." Sully stepped forward, his face now as red as his hair. "Karen, this is ridiculous. This is Captain Thorne. We've flown together 12 times. He's one of the most senior captains in the Chicago base." "Oh, really?" Karen said, turning her venom on Sully. "And how do I know you're not in on it? Maybe he fooled you too. Maybe you're both up to something." This was a new level of paranoia, a new level of insult. Marcus drew himself up to his full height. He was no longer a polite pilot. He was a captain in command. "Ms. Miller, you are currently impeding a flight crew from its duties. That is a direct violation of airline policy, and, I might add, federal regulations. Give me my identification and open the door." His voice was a low command, the kind that made flight attendants and air traffic controllers snap to attention. It had the opposite effect on Karen. "No," she said, a thrill of power running through her. She loved this, all the eyes on her. She was the one stopping the threat. "I don't believe you're a pilot," she said, her voice rising to a near shout. "And I definitely don't believe you're the captain of this aircraft. This ID is a forgery." The terminal was silent. The only sound was the distant whine of a jet engine. Marcus Thorne looked at her, his expression carved from granite. "Ma'am, you have just made a very serious accusation." "I have," Karen said triumphantly, "and I'm sticking by it. I am accusing you of attempting to access a secure flight deck with fraudulent identification." She reached under her desk and grabbed her internal phone. "Security! I need security at gate K12. Immediately! I have a potential 1544 violation, a man impersonating a pilot." Marcus Thorne didn't move. He simply crossed his arms and stared at her. The storm had broken, and he knew, with chilling certainty, exactly how it was going to end. The word security echoed through the gate area like a gunshot. Passengers who had been dozing or scrolling on their phones were now bolt upright, many of them pulling out their cameras to record. The tension, already high from the delays, spiked into a volatile new territory of fear and spectacle. "Karen, stop this! This is insane!" Sully pleaded, his voice cracking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You're going to get the entire airline sued." "I'm protecting the airline, Mr. Sullivan," Karen retorted, her eyes gleaming with self-righteousness. "I'm protecting these passengers from him." She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Marcus. The implication hung in the air, toxic and undeniable. Marcus held his ground. His Air Force training kicked in, a lifetime of discipline that had taught him to remain calm in the face of fire, both literal and metaphorical. He knew that the first person to lose their temper in this situation would lose everything else. "First Officer Sullivan," Marcus said, his voice a block of ice. "Stand down. Let her do this." Sully looked at his captain, bewildered. "But Cap—" "That's an order, Sully. We will follow her. Protocol." The last word was delivered with such biting sarcasm that even Karen flinched. 2 Chicago Aviation Police officers arrived within 60 seconds, pushing their way through the murmuring crowd. They were older, seasoned cops, not the fresh-faced TSA agents Karen was used to bullying. "What's the problem here, ma'am?" the first officer, named O'Malley, asked, his hand resting near his sidearm. "This man!" Karen practically shouted, shoving Marcus's ID card toward the officer. "He's impersonating a pilot. He's trying to get onto the flight deck. His ID is fake." Officer O'Malley took the ID. He looked at it. He looked at Marcus, who stood there, arms crossed, 4 stripes on his shoulders, an aura of authority radiating from him that no fake uniform could ever replicate. O'Malley looked back at Karen, his expression weary. "Ma'am, this looks like a standard transcontinental crew badge. A new one." "It's fake," Karen insisted, her voice getting shrill. "The hologram is wrong. He's not a captain. Look at him. Does he look like a transcontinental captain to you?" O'Malley's partner, a younger officer named Diaz, spoke up. "Ma'am, he looks like a pilot. He's in uniform. He's with his first officer." "Who could be in on it?" she shrieked. Marcus finally spoke. He addressed the officers, not Karen. "Gentlemen, my name is Captain Marcus Thorne. I am the pilot in command of Transcontinental Flight 1142, a Boeing 787 parked at this gate. This is my first officer, Evan Sullivan. We were attempting to board the aircraft to begin our pre-flight procedures when this Supervisor confiscated my federal credentials and accused me of fraud." O'Malley frowned. This was a jurisdictional nightmare. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, his patience clearly gone, "I need you to give me a real reason to detain this man. He doesn't look like a pilot, isn't one." "The ID is fake." Karen was becoming hysterical. She felt the situation slipping from her grasp. The officers didn't believe her. She had to escalate. "I am the senior authority at this gate, and I am telling you he is a security threat. Arrest him. Arrest him now, or I'll report you to your supervisor for failing to act." This was a critical miscalculation. O'Malley and Diaz exchanged a look. They were city police, contracted by the airport. They didn't take orders from gate agents. "Ma'am, you're creating a disturbance," Diaz said flatly. "Calm down." "I will not calm down." As Karen's tirade reached its crescendo, an entirely new player stepped out from the crowd. He was a man no one had noticed. He wore a rumpled, forgettable grey suit. He had been sitting in the back, seemingly reading a newspaper. He wasn't a passenger. He wasn't airline staff. He walked quietly up to the desk, his movements economical and precise. He flipped open a black leather wallet, flashing a badge at the two officers. Agent Harris, Federal Air Marshal Service. The entire scene froze. O'Malley and Diaz immediately straightened. "Sir," O'Malley said. Karen's mouth snapped shut. Agent Harris didn't look at Karen. He didn't look at the cops. He looked directly at Marcus. "Captain Thorne," Agent Harris said, his voice flat and professional. "Are you being prevented from accessing your flight deck?" "That is correct, Agent," Marcus replied, his arms still crossed. "By this gate, Agent?" "Correct." "On what grounds?" "She believes my credentials are fraudulent." Agent Harris finally turned his cold, analytical gaze on Karen Miller. She visibly shrank. This was not the security she had been expecting. This was the feds. "Ma'am," Agent Harris said. "What is your name?" "Karen Miller, Senior Gate Supervisor." "Ms. Miller, are you aware that Captain Thorne's identification contains a secondary biometric chip that I just scanned from my pocket?" Karen's blood ran cold. A what?" "And are you aware," Agent Harris continued, ignoring her, "that 49 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 15-44, makes it a federal offense to interfere with the duties of a flight crew member?" I was just... "Security protocol," Karen stammered. "Was it security protocol that made you inspect his badge?" Agent Harris asked. "Or his face?" The hologram. The hologram is the new FAA standard, rolled out last month." "Which you would know," Harris added, "if you'd read your security directives." Karen was silent. She was trapped. She looked at the officers, at her gate staff, at the sea of passengers, all of them staring, their phones all pointed at her. She had been the queen of this gate, and in 30 seconds, a man in a rumpled suit had dismantled her entire kingdom. "Now," Agent Harris said, "return the captain's property, immediately." Karen's hand, shaking violently, reached for the ID badge on the counter. She pushed it toward Marcus, her eyes downcast, her face a mask of scarlet humiliation. Marcus took his ID. He slid it back into his wallet. He nodded once to Agent Harris. "Thank you, Agent." "Have a safe flight, Captain," Harris replied. "We'll be in touch." Marcus and Sully turned, and without another word, Marcus swiped his now verified card. The latch on the jet bridge door clicked open. They walked through. The door shut behind them, leaving Karen Miller alone in the sudden, terrible silence of the gate. The show was over. But as Karen stood there, vibrating with rage and shame, the small desk phone beside her, the internal airline line, began to ring. It was a sharp, insistent ringing. She stared at it, frozen. "Ma'am?" Officer O'Malley said, gesturing to the phone. "You should probably get that." Slowly, as if it were a snake, Karen Miller picked up the receiver. "Gate K-12, Miller speaking." She listened. Her eyes went wide. The last remaining color drained from her face, leaving it a sickly, mottled white. She started to tremble, not with rage, but with pure, unadulterated terror. "Who?" she whispered. She listened again. "Yes, sir. He just boarded." A pause. "Yes, sir. Right now, yes, I understand." She hung up the phone, her hand dropping to her side, as if all the bones had been removed. Officer Diaz looked at her. "Trouble, ma'am." Karen Miller looked up, her eyes unfocused, staring at the closed jet bridge door. "That," she whispered, her voice hollow, "was the Chicago station manager. He's on his way. He said the senior vice president of operations called him, who was called by... She couldn't say it. "By who, ma'am?" O'Malley pressed. Karen swallowed, her throat dry. "By the director. the director of the entire Federal Aviation Administration, from Washington. He wanted to know why his pilot was being detained. The jet bridge was a long, quiet tube, a tunnel separating the chaos of the terminal from the sanctity of the aircraft. The thud of the door closing behind them was a punctuation mark on the ugliest pre-flight encounter of Marcus's career. Sully, his co-pilot, was practically vibrating with adrenaline. "I can't believe her. He could have fooled you, too. I wanted to. Cap, why did you tell me to stand down? We could have..." "Could have what, Sully?" Marcus said, not breaking stride. His voice was dangerously calm. "Made a scene? Yelled back? Given her exactly what she wanted? The one thing she couldn't take was our professionalism, so we didn't give it to her." "But Marcus, she accused you of being a criminal. She called the cops on you." Marcus stopped at the threshold of the 787's main door. A flight attendant, Sarah, was there to greet them, her face a mask of concern. "Captain, we heard shouting. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine, Sarah," Marcus said, his public-facing demeanor sliding back into place. "Just a small documentation issue at the gate. It's resolved." "Thank God," she breathed, relief flooding her face. "We're already 40 minutes behind." "We'll make it up," Marcus said. "Notify the cabin, please. We'll be on our way shortly." He and Sully entered the flight deck. The cockpit was dark, cold, and quiet. Marcus settled into the left-hand seat, the captain's seat, and the familiar, comforting scent of kerosene, electronics, and worn leather enveloped him. This was his office. This was his sanctuary. He put on his headset, and with a practiced, fluid series of motions, began the power-up sequence. The massive screens in front of him flickered to life, one by one, displaying the complex nervous system of the 300-ton machine. Sully, still agitated, took the right seat. "You're just going to let that go. She racially profiled you, Marcus, in front of everyone." Marcus finally paused. He turned in his seat to look at his first officer. "Sully," he said, his voice low and intense. "Do you know who Alan Reynolds is?" "Director Reynolds? The head of the FAA? Of course. I read his directives every week. Alan and I were in the Air Force together. We were rhinos in the 44th. Flew C-17s out of Charleston. He was my wingman for 5 years. He's godfather to my daughter, Maya." Sully's jaw dropped. You know the FAA director? Like, personally?" "He's the one who called me this morning," Marcus said, turning back to his monitors. "This flight to London? It's just the first leg. I'm not taking the return trip. I'm deadheading from Heathrow to DC tomorrow. Alan's in a fight with the unions over the new flight time awareness rules, and he needed a senior captain, someone outside the union leadership, to give a boots-on-the-ground brief to his advisory board." Sully was processing this. "So, that call at the gate?" "That wasn't Alan," Marcus said. "Alan's in a Senate hearing all morning. He wouldn't even know, unless..." Marcus's eyes drifted to the cockpit door. "Unless Agent Harris, our friendly neighborhood air marshal, decided to light a fire." So Harris called the FAA director's office, who called the transcontinental C-suite, who called the Chicago station manager, who called Karen, Sully said, piecing together the chain of command. All in about 90 seconds. That's biblical. "That's Washington," Marcus said curtly. "Now that's enough. We have a plane to fly. Pre-flight checklist. APU. APU. "On," Sully replied, his voice still shaky as he flipped the switch. The auxiliary power unit whirred to life, and the plane's main systems began to hum. For the next 20 minutes, there was no more talk of Karen Miller. There was only the ritual. "Yaw damper? On. Fuel pumps? On. We have 188,000 pounds, all balanced. Hydraulics? Systems A and C on electric, B on pneumatic, all green. This was the language of the sky, a precise, sacred liturgy that left no room for prejudice or ego. As they worked, Marcus felt the anger and humiliation of the gate recede. It was just noise. Out here, in the cold, logical world of systems and physics, he was not a black man. He was not a threat. He was just captain. Finally, the cabin was secure, the checklists were complete, and the ground crew had given them the all clear. Sully keyed the mic to the gate. "Gate K-12. This is Trans-Con 1142. We're ready for pushback." A new voice came over the speaker, a timid, male voice. "Ah, Roger, Captain. Releasing the door. Safe travels." Karen Miller was already gone. Sully turned to Marcus. "So what happens to her now?" Marcus looked out the window at the vast, grey expanse of O'Hare. "What always happens to people who dig their own graves, Sully? They eventually have to lie in them." He keyed his own mic, this time to the passengers. His voice, smooth and authoritative, filled the cabin. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Thorne speaking from the flight deck. First, I'd like to apologize for our delay this morning. We had a staffing issue at the gate that needed to be resolved. It has been. The weather over the Atlantic is looking good, and we anticipate a flight time of 7 hours and 30 minutes. We'll be climbing to our initial cruise altitude of 34,000 feet. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for departure." He clicked off the mic. He pushed the throttles forward. The massive Rolls-Royce engines spooled up with a deep, resonant roar. The plane, full of 250 souls, began to move. Marcus Thorne, the man accused of faking his identity, was now in complete control of a $250 million aircraft, ready to hurl it across an ocean at 600 miles per hour. He didn't look back at the terminal. He was already focused on the sky. While Flight 1142 was climbing through 10,000 feet, Karen Miller was sitting in a windowless room in the sub-level of Terminal 5. The room was painted a depressing shade of beige and was reserved for incident management. It smelled faintly of burnt coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Karen had been brought here by David Chen, the Transcontinental Airlines Chicago station manager, who had met her at the gate just moments after Captain Thorne's plane pushed back. David was a fast-talking, high-stress man whose entire life was a series of problems to be solved. And Karen Miller had just become his biggest problem of the quarter. "Do you know what you've done, Karen?" David said, pacing back and forth. He wasn't yelling. He was speaking in a low, furious, terrified voice, which was infinitely worse. "I was following security protocol, David. The ID looked suspicious. Shut up, Karen, just shut up. Stop talking," David snapped, holding up a hand. "I don't want to hear protocol. I don't want to hear suspicious. I want you to listen to the cascade you just triggered." He took a deep breath. "At 8:17 a.m., I get a call on my private cell, not my desk phone, my cell. It's from Robert Jacoby. You know who that is?" Karen shook her head, numb. "He's the senior vice president of operations. He works in the Willis Tower. He's a god, basically. He doesn't know my name, but he knew it today. And do you know why he called me, Karen? The FAA director." "Correct," David said, a hysterical little laugh escaping his lips. "The FAA director, Alan Reynolds, as in the guy who runs all of aviation in the United States. He's in a Senate appropriations hearing, Karen. A big one. And he was pulled out of that hearing by his chief of staff, who had just been contacted by an air marshal at your gate to be told that his star pilot was being detained by you for impersonating a captain." Karen felt sick. "Robert Jacoby didn't ask me what happened," David continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He didn't ask for your side of the story. He told me. He said, 'Fix this. Fix it 5 minutes ago, and then fire her.' That was it. Fire her. Karen's world tilted. Fire? Me? David, I have been here for 22 years. I have seniority. The union. The union? David laughed, a harsh, barking sound. The union can't save you from this. You didn't violate a CBA agreement, Karen. You didn't file a grievance. You committed a federal offense. You detained a flight crew. You profiled a captain, a black captain for God's sake, in 2025, in a terminal full of people with smartphones. Do you have any idea how many videos of you are already on Twitter? Airport Karen harasses black pilot. It's everywhere. But, she stammered. He's friends with the director. It's a setup. It's not fair. David stopped pacing and stared at her, his face a mask of utter contempt. That's what you're going with. It's not fair, he hissed. You think this is happening because he knows the director? No, Karen. This is happening because you are a liability. This is happening because you let your petty, miserable power trip get the better of you, and you did it to the wrong person on the wrong day. He leaned in, planting his hands on the table. Let me tell you who Marcus Thorne is. Because I had to pull his file. He's not just friends with the director. He's a 20-year Air Force veteran. He's a lead instructor on the 787 fleet. He's a liaison captain for the FAA's Project Wingman safety initiative. The man doesn't just fly the planes, Karen. He helps write the safety rules for them. The new ID card you thought was fake. He was on the committee that designed it. Karen Miller felt the floor drop out from beneath her. The blood drained from her head, leaving a cold, metallic ringing in her ears. She had accused the man who helped design the ID of faking the ID. Oh God, she whispered, the full, crushing weight of her stupidity landing on her. Yes. Oh God, David said, straightening up. The airline's legal team is already on a conference call. They're not discussing how to defend you. They're discussing the terms of the settlement they're going to have to offer Captain Thorne. And your termination is condition number 1 of that offer. We have to show we're taking swift, decisive action. You, Karen, are the decisive action. My pension, she whispered. She was 2 years from retirement. I don't know, David said, suddenly looking tired. That's for HR and legal to fight over. But your employment with Transcontinental Airlines is over, effective immediately. He slid a form across the table. You're suspended, pending termination, which will be final by end of day. You are to hand over your airport badge and your airline credentials. He pointed to the SIDA, Security Identification Display area, badge hanging from her neck. The badge that had been the source of all her power. No, David, please, she begged, tears finally welling in her eyes. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I'll apologize. I'll go to sensitivity training. Please don't take my badge. It's my life. It was your life, David said, his voice void of all sympathy. And you just threw it away because you couldn't stand to see a black man in a captain's uniform. You did this. Not him. Not me. You. A new person entered the room. A large, stone-faced man in an airport security uniform. He wasn't one of the CPD officers. He was from Airport Operations. Karen Miller, the man said. This is her, David said. She's being escorted out. Her SIDA access is revoked. The man nodded, pulling out a pair of shears. Ma'am, I need the badge. Karen looked at him, then at David, her face crumbling. The tears came, hot and fast, a pathetic, sniffling end to a 22-year career. She reached up, her fingers fumbling with the clasp. She couldn't do it. The security officer, with a sigh of impatience, stepped forward, grabbed the lanyard, and with a single snip, cut it from her neck. The plastic badge, the symbol of her entire identity, clattered onto the beige table. This way, ma'am, the officer said, gesturing to the door. We'll take the employee exit. Karen Miller, no longer a supervisor, no longer a gatekeeper, no longer anything, stood up on wobbly legs. She was just a middle-aged woman in a slightly too tight uniform who had just made the last and worst mistake of her life. She was walked through a series of grey corridors, a maze she had navigated as a queen for decades, and was deposited at an employee bus stop outside the secure area. The 8 a.m. chaos was now the 9:30 a.m. grind. The November wind was colder out here. Karen Miller sat on the cold metal bench, her small purse in her lap, and waited for the bus to take her to the employee parking lot for the last time. She was, for the first time in 22 years, just a member of the public. And Flight 1142, with Captain Marcus Thorne at the controls, was just a blinking green light, 35,000 feet over the Canadian wilderness, rock steady and climbing. The internet moves faster than a 787. By the time Marcus Thorne was over the North Atlantic, the incident at Gate K-12 was the #1 trending topic on Twitter. A passenger, a college student named Leo, had filmed the entire confrontation. His video, shot from a shaky, low angle, was devastatingly clear. It started with Karen's shrill voice. "This ID looks funny." It captured Sully's defense. It captured Karen's snare. "How do I know you're not in on it?" And most damningly, it captured her shouting at the police, "He's not a captain. Look at him. Does he look like a transcontinental captain to you?" Leo had posted it with a simple caption. "At O'Hare, gate agent for Transconair won't let the pilot on the plane. She said he doesn't look like a captain. Guess why? Airport Karen got off flying while black. Transconair." The post exploded. First, it was picked up by aviation bloggers and travel influencers who were horrified by the breach of professionalism. Then, it was picked up by major news outlets. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all ran segments. The shaky video of Karen Miller's face, contorted in suspicion, was broadcast to millions. Her name, which was visible on her name tag in a high-resolution screenshot, was plastered everywhere. Karen Miller, Transcontinental Supervisor. The airline's corporate PR department went into full-blown DEFCON 1. Their official Twitter account, which had been placidly posting about new lounge openings, was suddenly inundated with tens of thousands of messages. "Transconair, your employee Karen Miller is a racist disgrace. Fire her. Now. Transconair, I'm a million-miler with you. I will never fly your airline again until you issue a public apology to this captain and fire the supervisor who harassed him. Hey, FAA News, you good with this? Transconair letting gate agents detain pilots based on skin color?" The airline's stock price, which had been stable, began to flicker. In a volatile market, any PR disaster could shave points off, and this was a disaster of the first order. In the Willis Tower, Robert Jacoby, the SVP of Operations who had called David Chen, was in a crisis meeting with the CEO and the chief legal officer. "How bad is it?" the CEO asked, his face grey. "It's catastrophic," the legal officer said. "The video is unambiguous. She profiles him. She escalates. She calls security. She even implicates the first officer. We're not just looking at a lawsuit from Captain Thorne. We're looking at a class action suit for a hostile work environment from every minority employee we have." "And Thorne," Jacoby added, "is not just any pilot. He's the pilot. The FAA liaison. The one everyone respects. We don't just look racist, we look incompetent. We look like we're harassing the very people who write the regulations." The CEO put his head in his hands. "What's our move?" "We've already terminated Miller. That was the easy part," Jacoby said. "We're releasing a statement in 10 minutes. Full-throated apology. Zero-tolerance policy." Thorough review of our training protocols. The usual. It won't be enough, the legal officer said. This is a fire. We need an extinguisher. We need Captain Thorne. What do you mean? We can't get to him. He's in the air in a secure cockpit, flying over an ocean. The second he lands at Heathrow, we need to have our London station manager meet him on the jet bridge. Not with a lawyer, but with an apology. The CEO needs to call him personally. We need to offer him anything. A bonus, a paid leave, whatever he wants. We need to make it clear that the airline stands with him, not with Karen Miller. And Miller? The CEO asked. We ruin her, the legal officer said, his voice cold. We make her the scapegoat for everything. We're issuing a statement to our internal staff that Ms. Miller's actions were a grotesque violation of our core values, and she has been terminated. We're cooperating fully with the FAA and the DOT. We're not just firing her, we're disavowing her. We're pushing her off the lifeboat. The CEO nodded. Do it. Meanwhile, in a suburban neighborhood outside O'Hare, Karen Miller's phone was melting. She'd been on the bus home, numb when it started. First, a text from her sister. Is this you on CNN? Then a friend. Karen, what did you do? Now her Facebook account, which she'd left public, was a cesspool. Her face, her vacation photos, her pictures of her cats, all of it was being defaced with hateful comments. People were posting her home address, which they'd found in online public records. A local news van was already parked on the street outside her small brick bungalow. She sat in her living room, curtains drawn, listening to the chime of her phone, each notification a new nail in her coffin. She had been the one with the power. She had been the one who judged others, who held the power of denied. Now the entire world was judging her. The entire world was denying her. She was no longer Karen Miller, senior gate supervisor. She was Airport Karen, a global meme, a synonym for racist arrogance. Her 22-year career, her pension, her reputation, her quiet life. All of it was gone. Incinerated in a 3-minute confrontation that she had initiated, fueled, and escalated all by herself. 7 hours later, Captain Marcus Thorne executed a flawless, buttery smooth landing at London Heathrow. As the 787 taxied to the gate, his phone, which had been in airplane mode, reconnected to the network. It immediately became unusable. A solid wall of hundreds of notifications, texts, voicemails, news alerts flowed in. Cap? Sully said from the right seat, looking at his own phone with wide eyes. You need to see this. We're famous. Marcus silenced his phone and focused on shutting down the engines. The parking checklist was his only concern. Park and brake. Set. Engines. Shut down. APU. On. Only when the aircraft was cold and dark did he unbuckle his harness. Let's see the damage. He opened his texts. The first one was from his wife. Marcus, are you okay? The news? Call me. The second was from Alan Reynolds, the FAA director. Just saw the video. Jesus, Mark, I am so sorry. My office is already in touch with Transcon's CEO. This will be handled. You have my word. See you in DC. The third was from an unknown number. Captain Thorne, this is Elizabeth Price, Chief Legal Officer for Transcontinental. We have a car waiting for you at arrivals to take you to your hotel. Please, call me at your earliest convenience. We have already terminated the employee involved, and we offer our deepest, most profound apologies. Marcus read the texts, his face impassive. Sully was scrolling through Twitter. My God, Marcus, the video has 20 million views. 20 million. They're calling her Gatekeeper Karen. Good, Marcus said, standing up and grabbing his flight bag. Some titles are earned. When they opened the cockpit door, the London station manager, a flustered-looking Brit named Nigel, was standing there, wringing his hands. "Captain Thorne," Nigel said, his voice dripping with deference. "Mr. Sullivan, on behalf of Transcontinental Airlines, we are just appallingly sorry. I cannot find the words." "Nigel," Marcus said, holding up a hand. "I appreciate it. It was not a good day, but it's over. I'm heading to my hotel." "Of course, Captain. Of course. A car is waiting. And our CEO, Mr. Harrison, would like to speak with you personally, whenever you are free." "I'll call him from the hotel," Marcus said. He just wanted to sleep. As he walked down the jet bridge, the passengers from the flight were waiting. As he stepped out, they began to clap. It started with a few, then spread. The entire gate area, full of the 250 people who had flown with him, erupted in a standing ovation. They had all seen the video on the in-flight Wi-Fi. They knew what he had endured before he'd safely delivered them across an ocean. Marcus, a man not easily moved, felt a lump in his throat. He gave a short, appreciative nod to the crowd, a silent thank you, and walked on. The karma for Karen Miller, however, was just getting started. Her termination was the beginning, not the end. The FAA, led by a furious Alan Reynolds, launched a formal investigation. This wasn't just a PR issue, it was a safety issue. The FAA investigation was swift and brutal. They found that Karen Miller, in her 22-year career, had 34 formal complaints filed against her. 29 of them were from minority passengers or crew members, alleging rudeness, profiling, and baseless accusations. She had been protected by her seniority and a manager who didn't want the paperwork. But the most damning discovery was what Agent Harris, the Air Marshal, filed in his report. He reported that Karen Miller had, by detaining the pick, created a critical security vulnerability. By shouting and drawing a crowd, she had created a distraction, the perfect cover for a real terrorist attack. By calling the police on the pilots, she had misused and diverted security resources. The FAA didn't just support her firing, they brought their own charges. 2 weeks later, back in her sad, quiet bungalow, Karen Miller received a certified letter. It was from the Federal Aviation Administration. She was being personally fined $25,000 for interference with the duties of a flight crew member under 49 U.S.C. por cercao 463 Wild. This was not a fine against the airline. This was a civil penalty leveled against her. The $25,000 would be garnished from her bank accounts and any future wages. Her pending pension, which the airline's legal team was fighting to deny her, was now completely frozen to pay the federal fine. But the final, most exquisite piece of karma was yet to come. Transcontinental Airlines, in its settlement with Captain Thorne, who, incidentally, directed his entire settlement to a scholarship fund for minority aviation students, had to prove it was taking this seriously. They not only fired Karen Miller, they blacklisted her. She was placed on the involuntary no-board list for Transcontinental Airlines. For life, the woman who had spent 2 decades deciding who could or couldn't get on a plane was now, herself, permanently barred from flying her hometown's signature airline. The irony was complete. 1 month later, the frantic, buzzing chaos of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 5 was unchanged. It was the same sea of anxious travelers, the same dizzying aroma of Cinnabon and jet fuel, the same backdrop of frantic, overlapping announcements. The airport itself was a living organism, indifferent to the small human dramas that played out within its arteries. But for Captain Marcus Thorne, something was irrevocably different. As he walked toward the K-gates, he felt a new, strange awareness. People looked at him. It wasn't the usual casual glance afforded to a pilot in uniform. It was a look of recognition. He saw a baggage handler stop and point. He saw a barista whisper to her co-worker. He had become, in the last 30 days, the most famous pilot in the transcontinental fleet, and perhaps the most famous black pilot in the country. Airport Karen had made him a reluctant celebrity. He met his first officer, Sully, at their usual pre-flight coffee spot. "There he is," Sully said, raising his cup in a mock toast. "The legend, the man, the myth, the Thorn Rule." Marcus sighed, taking his black coffee. "Don't call it that, Sully. It's not funny." "I'm not kidding," Sully said, his voice earnest. "My cousin who works for Delta in Atlanta. He had to take it. Unconscious bias in crew verification, they're calling it. But everyone on the ground floor calls it the Thorn Rule. You, my friend, are officially a training module." "I'd rather just be a pilot," Marcus said, but a small smile touched his lips. They began the long walk toward the gate. "Seriously though, Cap," Sully said, his tone shifting. "How are you? For real? I saw the airline's press release about your scholarship fund. That was class, Marcus. Pure class." Marcus nodded, watching the crowds part for them. "My wife and I talked about it. The settlement was significant, more than I was comfortable with. We didn't need it. But there are kids out there who look like me, who dream of sitting in the left-hand seat, but don't have the $150,000 for flight school. If Karen Miller's bigotry can pay for 5 of them to get their wings, that feels like the right kind of karma." As they neared Gate K-12, Marcus felt his stomach tighten. It was an involuntary, physical reaction. The gate looked exactly the same. The podium was in the same spot. The blue-grey carpet was just as worn. For a fraction of a second, he didn't see the current passengers. He saw a ghost. He saw Karen Miller's face, contorted in sneering suspicion, her finger stabbing the air. "He's not a captain!" He must have paused, because Sully's voice cut through the memory. "You good, Cap?" Marcus blinked. The ghost was gone. "Fine," he said, his voice steady. "Let's go." They reached the podium. A new, young gate agent was stationed there. His name tag read Amir. He was a slight man, perhaps in his mid-20s, with dark, nervous eyes. When he saw Marcus and Sully approach, he physically straightened, as if a general had just walked into his barracks. "Captain Thorne, sir. First Officer Sullivan." Amir's voice was tight with anxiety. "Welcome. Good morning. We're ready for you. Everything is in perfect order." "Good morning, Amir," Marcus said, his voice deliberately warm and calm. He could see the young man's hands were trembling slightly. He held out his ID. "Just Marcus is fine. How's 1142 looking?" Amir took the ID, fumbling with the scanner for a second. Beep. The light flashed green. He handed it back as if it were a fragile artifact. "On time, sir. Perfectly on time." Amir swallowed, then seemed to make a decision. "And Captain? If I may, sir." "Go ahead," Marcus said, holding his gaze. I wanted to say thank you." Marcus frowned. "For what?" My uncle is a baggage handler here, for 20 years. He's from Pakistan, and he's had his run-ins. With Ms. Miller, with others. People give him a hard time. They'd randomly search his bag every day. Stuff like that. He just took it. We all just took it." Amir looked up, his eyes meeting Marcus's. "When we all saw that video, and then when the memos came down from corporate, when they flew in trainers from DC for that mandatory 8-hour class, it was the first time my uncle said he felt like things could actually change. So, thank you." for not backing down. Marcus was silent for a moment. He looked at this young man, who was part of a new generation, and felt a weight he hadn't known he was carrying. "Thank you, Amir. That means a lot. Keep up the good work." "Yes, sir." As they walked through the door and onto the jet bridge, Sully let out a low whistle. "Damn, Cap. A training module and a folk hero. You've had a busy month." Marcus didn't reply. He was thinking of the 29 other complaints, the 29 other Amir's uncles who had been harassed by Karen Miller and had just taken it. He hadn't just been fighting for himself. He'd been fighting for all of them. He entered the cockpit, his sanctuary. The familiar, comforting scent of electronics and worn leather greeted him. He settled into the left-hand seat and began his power-up sequence. The screens flickered to life. As Sully ran the external checks, Marcus had a moment to himself. He thought of Karen Miller. He'd heard she'd sold her bungalow and moved to a small town in Florida where no one knew her face. He'd heard about the $25,000 fine from the FAA, a debt that had likely consumed her savings. He'd heard she was blacklisted from Transcontinental, a permanent, ironic end to her 22-year career. He felt no joy, no triumph, just a profound, weary sadness, a sadness for a life wasted on such petty, bitter anger. Her fate wasn't justice, not really. It was just gravity. It was the simple, inescapable physics of a life lived in a downward spiral. She had finally hit the ground. His phone buzzed. A text from Alan Reynolds, the FAA director. "See you in DC next week. The task force is officially a go. Get ready to make some real changes, Mark." That, Marcus thought, was the real victory. It wasn't the firing. It wasn't the money. It was that he was now in a position to help dismantle the very system that had allowed a Karen Miller to flourish for 2 decades. His testimony, and the testimony of those 29 other unheard voices, was going to be the foundation for a new, mandatory training protocol for every single airport employee in the nation. Sully slid into the right seat, headset on. "Pre-flight checklist complete. She's all yours, Captain." Marcus put the ghost of Karen Miller out of his mind. He put the texts, the videos, and the Thorn rule away. He was no longer a symbol, a victim, or a folk hero. He was a pilot. He keyed his mic, his voice the smooth, professional baritone of a man in total command. "O'Hare ground, Transcontinental 1142. Heavy, at gate K12, with information. Papa, ready for pushback and start." A crisp, anonymous, and perfectly professional voice replied instantly from the tower. "Transcontinental 1142, O'Hare ground. Pushback approved. Expect runway 28 right. Good morning, Captain." Marcus keyed the mic one last time. "Pushback approved. 28 right. Good morning. Transcon 1142. He turned to his first officer. "Ready, Sully?" Sully grinned. "Ready as always, Cap. Let's go to work." Marcus's hands moved over the controls. He advanced the throttles, and the massive 787, with 250 souls on board, began its powerful, inexorable push backward. He didn't look back at the terminal. He looked forward, at the long ribbon of concrete, and the open, limitless sky. And that is the incredible, real-life story of how a single act of prejudice at an airport gate triggered a career-ending avalanche. Karen Miller thought she was the law, but she forgot that no one is above the law. She chose to see a man's color, not his 4 stripes, and paid the ultimate price. The hard karma here wasn't just that she got fired. It's that her own obsession with security and rules was the very thing that led to her downfall. She was fined by the FAA, blacklisted by the airline, and became a global symbol of arrogance. What do you think? Was this karma deserved? Was the airline's response and the $25,000 federal fine too much or not enough? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories where arrogance meets hard, inescapable karma, please make sure to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to see justice served. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We post new, dramatic, real-life stories every single week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching.